The ego wants answers, being enjoys the question. That is not a puzzle to be solved, but an invitation to shift the very axis on which your life turns. You have been taught almost from the first cry that reality is a riddle with a single correct solution, and that your task is to tighten your jaw, fix your gaze, clench your will, and wrestle the world into clarity. Yet the more you force clarity, the more it fractures. The tighter your grip, the sandier the grain of the world feels in your fist. What if the point is not to clinch the final answer, but to dance with the living question? What if certainty is the cage and curiosity is the sky? You and I have been conditioned to treat life as a test in which the teacher prowls the aisles with a red pen. What is the meaning of life? We whisper, as if the universe were a stern examiner and we were underprepared students who must not fail. But life is not a test. Life is a symphony, one you cannot pass, only hear. The meaning is not a sentence to memorize. It is the resonance of being here now with the music, the tempo, the silence between notes, and the trembling of your chest as the drum of your own heart keeps time. Imagine a child at the edge of the sea. The waves do not demand definitions. They arrive, they bow, they withdraw, and the child laughs. No theory required. The water is not asking to be pinned to a board like a lifeless specimen. It is asking to be splashed, felt, shared. In that laughter, the question is alive. Not what is a wave, but ah! And in that simple exclamation, the world and the one who beholds it are not two things, but one event, shimmering. Now the ego doesn't trust shimmering. The ego insists on handles, labels, guarantees. It is a marvelous engineer of plans and a fearful guardian of borders. It wants answers because answers feel like walls and walls feel like safety. But your life is not meant to be safe in the way a stone is safe in a museum case. Your life is meant to be alive, and life is risky, messy, mercurial. The very intelligence that grows the cells of your skin and the leaves on the oak tree seems to prefer flow over fixity, openness over certainty, play over posture. Think of the mind as a spotlight sweeping across a stage. It illuminates what it points at, and everything else recedes into darkness. The ego tightens that beam, attempting to freeze the scene. Being loosens it, lets it widen, soften, until the edges blur, and the hidden musicians, the curtains, the audience, the smell of dust and velvet, all return to the show. When the beam softens, a strange thing happens. You begin to notice that you are not merely the watcher in the seat. You are also the stage and the stagehand, the violin and the bow, the curtain and the breath behind the curtain. The question, what am I, unfolds like a paper flower in water, and each petal is an aspect of this moment you hadn't allowed yourself to see. Let us be bold then. Let us say the problem is not your lack of answers. The problem is your stance toward life as a questionnaire. The world is not a crossword to be filled in neatly. It is a living poem that writes itself as you read it, and the ink is made of your attention. If I could offer you one simple, scandalous adjustment, it would be this. When the mind tightens and asks for closure, breathe and open into the question. Taste it on the tongue. Feel it in the spine. The question is not a door you must slam shut. The question is the door already open. To be clear, this is not an attack on thinking. Thought is a fine instrument, like a violin or a compass. But a compass cannot drink tea with you, and a violin cannot hug your child. The instrument serves the song. It is not the song. The ego confuses the two. Because it fears, it grasps. Because it grasps, it shrinks. And because it shrinks, it mistakes the edges of its grasp for the edges of the world. Being does not shrink. Being breathes. Being trusts that the sea knows how to wave without consulting a manual, that the stars know how to burn without a calendar, and that you, being of that same intelligence, know how to live when you stop bullying yourself into certainty and listen. Today, let us walk together into that listening, not to accumulate doctrines, but to shed them. Not to improve the ego at its favorite game, but to invite the ego to sit, to sip, to rest its tired arms from lifting the weight of all those answers it thought it must hold. There is a deeper ease available in the marrow of this moment. There is a deeper joy in the curiosity itself, in the discovery that you are not a creature besieged by questions, but a cosmos that flowers as questions and answers and the delicious space between. So I say again plainly, the ego wants answers. Being enjoys the question. If you hear that as a riddle, you will seek the key. If you hear it as a bell, you will simply listen. And in listening, you may find that the bell is not outside you at all. It is the shape of your own attention ringing through an open sky. Consider how you learn to look at time. For the ego, time is a corridor with locked doors. Each door bears the label of a milestone: career, relationship, status, meaning, and you hustle down the hall collecting keys. When the door opens, relief, brief and bright. Then another door appears, another key to forge, another proof to assemble. In this corridor, questions are inconveniences, traffic cones on the way to the answer. But being experiences time as a garden. There is no hallway, no locked rooms, only seasons that revolve in their own rhythm. In a garden, questions are sunlight. They coax the buds to open. Let us walk a little in that garden. Somewhere a fountain is speaking in a language without words. It is the language of pattern. The way water arcs, shatters, recomposes, the way drops meet the pool and make rings that widen, intersect, and vanish. If you listen with the mind that demands meaning, the fountain says nothing, and you tire quickly. If you listen with being, the fountain is full of the sensation of coolness and movement, full of the shape of surrender. Water does not plan how to fall. It simply falls, and the world becomes beautiful where it lands. Now, I'm not asking you to abandon your plans only to see their place. Think of them like maps for sailors, useful sketches of currents and reefs, but not the ocean itself. The ego mistakes the map for the sea and then drowns in its own cartography, fretting over lines as the wind sings. Being rolls out the map, bows to its utility, and then lets the boat feel the water. There is a secret here. The boat that feels its way learns a different intelligence. The intelligence of the body, the wind, the taste of salt, the subtle tilt of the hull. This intelligence is a question asked with the skin rather than the tongue, and the answer is not a sentence, but the wake unraveling behind you. You might say, but if I do not answer the question, who am I? How shall I live? Observe something curious. When you stare at your hand and ask, what is the precise definition of a hand? The hand does not wait for your conclusion to move. It moves. It scratches an itch, points to a bird, cups another hand in kindness. The living truth precedes the mental verdict. In the same way, your life is already moving. It breathes you in sleep. It heals the cut without committee. It plays the flute of your laughter on a day you did not plan to be joyful. We have placed thought on a throne it never asked for, and in crowning it, we cast a shadow over the kingdom it was meant to serve. Let me tell you a little parable. A traveler comes to a river. On this side, he has questions. On the far bank, he imagines answers. So he builds a raft of concepts and paddles across. Reaching the other side, he hoists the raft onto his back and begins to climb a mountain, sweating under the weight. A sage watches and laughs gently, not unkindly. The traveler is baffled. Why do you laugh? The sage replies, because the raft was for crossing, not for carrying. Your ideas, your conclusions, wonderful rafts, but should they have served their purpose, set them down. Otherwise, your answers become burdens heavier than your ignorance. Now, from another angle, the ego seeks answers in order to control reality. And control is a subtle form of fear. It is the fear that life cannot be trusted, that unless you hold it tightly, it will betray you. Being is a kind of faith, not blind belief, but direct perception that the river flows even when you do not supervise it. It is the faith of a dancer who knows that the floor will not disappear, that if she leans into the spin will hold her. There is a profound relaxation in this trust, a relaxation that allows you to act more skillfully, not less. For when the mind is no longer clenched, intelligence spreads through the whole body, and your hands, your eyes, your voice, all become instruments of a wider knowing. This is where paradox comes alive. The moment you accept not knowing, you begin to know in a fresh way. The moment you relax your demand for an answer, you hear a different answer, one that is not a proposition but a presence. Ask, what is the meaning of this moment? And the ego writes an essay. Instead, feel the meaning, the warmth of a cup, the echo of a friend's laughter in your ribs, the way the rain gives the street a sheen that makes even the traffic lights tender. You do not hold the meaning, it holds you. And in that reversal, the world turns luminous. We often confuse the enjoyment of the question with passivity. But inquiry, when it is alive, is not idle. It is a flame that consumes falsity. The false self cannot stand in the fire of sincere attention. When you sit quietly and let the question, "What am I?" enter you, not to catch it like a prize, but to let it resonate, the identifications drop away. I am my role. The flame touches it. It smokes and disappears. I am my history. Another curl of smoke. I am my opinions, my victories, my wounds. Ash on the hearth. What remains is not a tidy statement. It is a silence that is not empty. It is a presence that does not explain itself because it does not need explanation to be real. This presence is already here, humming beneath the nervous search for closure. It surfaces in moments you have likely dismissed as trivial. The instant before speech when something in you listens. The pulse of awe at a sunrise you did not schedule. The restfulness that comes when you finally stop arguing with what is happening. In those instants, the ego's hunger for answers quiets, and being savors the question, relishes the taste of existence itself. The tomato needs no reason to be red. The sky needs no theory to be wide. And you need no justification to be what you are when you are not pretending to be what you think. How does this vision translate into the fabric of your days? Start simply. Cultivate friendly attention, not the willful stare of a guard, but the soft gaze of a gardener. When you wake, notice the first thought that rises like steam. Instead of wrestling it into clarity, smile at it as you would at a chill, running ahead on the path. Follow, but do not yank. Ask, not mentally, but with your posture, what is here? The answer will not be an argument. It will be the texture of your sheet, the taste in your mouth, the light on the curtain. You are discovering that awareness is an intimacy more fundamental than explanation. Give your breath a wider berth. The ego treats the breath like a utility, background, unworthy of wonder. Being attends to it as music. When you sit, let the breath come and go as if the whole world were breathing you. Feel how on the in-breath the body opens like a sail catching wind, and on the out-breath the boat glides. Allow thoughts to float like gulls across the mast. You needn't chase or shoo them. To befriend the breath is to befriend impermanence. Each inhalation a birth, each exhalation a dignified death, and in between, the sparkling of now. In relationships, notice the reflex that tries to resolve the other person, to file them under a label for safety. She is always, he never. You can feel the comfort in such sentences. You can also feel the prison. Instead, experiment with the living question. Who is this being in this moment? Do not ask it with suspicion, but with wonder. You will find that the answer is always changing, and while that may unsettle the ego, it delights being. In that delight, compassion arises, not as a rule, but as a natural response to the miracle of another unfolding before you. In work, the ego insists on outcomes. Show me the metrics, prove your worth, secure the result. By all means, set the compass. But then work like a musician practices, not to strangle perfection from the instrument, but to explore the infinite ways a phrase can breathe. If your day is a score, then let your meetings be movements, your emails be rests and crescendos, your walk to lunch be a cadenza of fresh air. The question animating your work is not, will this guarantee my future, but how does life wish to express through these hands today? This is not fancy poetry, it is practical freedom. You become less brittle, more responsive, and paradoxically, more effective, because the rigidity that breaks under pressure has softened into resilience. As for anxiety, understand its engine. Anxiety is the body's way of revealing the ego's negotiation with the future. The ego says, give me answers now so I can be safe then. Being answers, feel now, act now, trust now. One practice, when the anxious surge arrives, do not argue with it. Turn toward it with the curiosity we have been honoring. Where in the body does it appear? A tightness in the chest, a flutter in the belly. Place a warm palm there. Let the question be somatic. What is this energy like? If you avoid naming it panic or failure, you may discover heat, vibration, waves rising and settling. If a friend were trembling, you would not demand a thesis. You would sit close. Offer yourself that closeness. Another practice, deliberate periods of purposelessness. The ego hears purposeless and panics. It imagines decay, but purposelessness is the meadow where being grazes. Walk without destination. Brew tea with no agenda but the steam. Sit by a window and receive the world as it passes. In these spaces, a strange intelligence steals in through the cracks. The intelligence that organizes flocks of birds into arabesques without a conductor, that turns fallen leaves into soil without a committee. You begin to sense that your life is not a project you manage, but a movement you participate in, and that the questions that cannot be answered by force often answer themselves by grace. Let us speak also of loss. Loss is the great unmasker of the ego's demand for control. A love ends, a job dissolves, a body changes, and the mind ransacks the air for answers. Why? What could I have done? Useful questions sometimes, but beneath them lies the deeper invitation to feel the ache without a story. Not because stories are bad, but because they can become shields that keep the ache from doing its holy work. To sit in grief is to consent to the question that has no tidy reply: what is this disappearing? In consenting, you join the tide that carries all forms in and out. You are baptized in impermanence. And as the salt dries on your skin, you may find, quietly, scandalously, that love has not gone anywhere. Its form has changed. Its pulse persists. Now, when I say the ego wants answers, please hear that the ego is not your enemy. It is a useful mask in the play, a character with skills, discrimination, memory, calculation. But it panics when it forgets. It is a mask and claims to be your face. Being is the stage, the light, the audience, the playwright, all of it. When the mask relaxes back onto the face, knowing it is a mask, the play becomes vivid and kind. You still keep appointments, you still lock doors at night. Yet beneath the ordinary arrangements runs a river of ease, and the question that once frightened you becomes sweet company. This sweetness reveals a subtle miracle. Joy is not the prize for having solved life. Joy is the fragrance of being present with life unsolved. It appears mischievously in the middle of washing dishes, in the ordinary choreography of soap and plate and warm water. It appears in a traffic jam when you look up and the cloud has dressed the sky in silk. It appears when you stop arguing with the weather inside your own mind and let it be weather. The ego wants to own joy as a possession. Being lets joy visit as a friend, unannounced, and sets another place at the table. The deeper transformation begins when you taste, even briefly, that who you are is not the voice demanding clarity, but the spaciousness within which the voice arises. The voice will continue its habit. It will present proposals, forecasts, critiques, but you will know it as weather, not as climate. In that knowing, a profound gentleness emerges. You no longer beat yourself for not being certain. You become a host to your experience, and a good host does not interrogate every guest at the door. He opens, he offers tea, he listens, he laughs when laughter comes, he weeps when tears come, and he notices that the house does not collapse. Some will call this detachment. I call it intimacy. Detachment imagines a sterile distance from life. Intimacy realizes that life is not other than you. The wave is intimate with the sea because it is the sea. When you live as this intimacy, moral life flows without coercion. Compassion ceases to be an obligation and becomes a relief, as if a tight belt had been loosened around the heart. You discover that forgiving is easier than rehearsing. That understanding requires less effort than condemnation, that the question, what is this person's deepest longing, brings more intelligence to a conflict than the answer, they are wrong. The human condition, this glorious, bewildering condition, is the dance of forgetting and remembering. We forget that we are being, and we remember by surprise, a breeze, a glance, the way sunlight can sermonize without words upon a dusty mantle. The spiritual path is not a ladder you climb to escape the earth. It is a spiral that brings you into earth more fully until you feel the hum of the same life in your bones and in the beetle under the stone. You do not transcend the question, you mature into it. Maturity is not a stack of answers. It is a widening tolerance for mystery coupled with a keen capacity for love. If you want a simple orientation, try this. Feel the difference between grasping and receiving. Grasping hardens the body, receiving softens it. Grasping narrows the eyes, receiving widens the gaze. Grasping speaks first, receiving listens. You can test this in the smallest of moments. reaching for your phone, responding to a message, choosing lunch. The world does not ask you to be perfect. It invites you to become sensitive. Sensitivity is the instrument on which being plays its wisdom. Let go, too, of the fantasy of a final resolution. The ego imagines a future scene in which it finally arrives at a plateau of permanent clarity, where every question has been filed, every ambiguity tamed. But aliveness is not a plateau, it is a coastline, always meeting the sea. There will be storms, there will be bright mornings, there will be fog. When you stop demanding that the coastline be straight, you begin to love the very curves that once maddened you, and love makes you brave. Brave enough to say, "I don't know," with a smile. Brave enough to move without the certificate of certainty. Brave enough to delight in the question that endures because you endure with it. Now let us close with a meditation, not as a technique to acquire, but as a taste to savor. Sit as you are. Feel the earth supporting you. It has been supporting you since before you were able to ask for support. Allow the breath to reveal itself. On the in-breath, silently recognize arriving. On the out-breath, silently recognize belonging, arriving in the freshness of this exact moment, belonging to the field from which moments arise. If thoughts gather like birds on a wire, let them have their wire. You needn't shoo them. If feelings surge like tide, let them leave their seaweed on the sand. You remain the shore, ever present, ever receptive. Bring to heart some unresolved matter, the place where the ego's jaw clenches and the mind rehearses its arguments. Do not attempt to untie the knot by force. Instead, ask the living question inwardly, what is this? As sensation, let it show you its shape, tingling, heat, cool, a shiver, a void. Trust what appears. Now soften around it as you would around a startled animal. Offer it a little space. Offer it time. Notice how, when bullied for a conclusion, it hardens. When given room, it breathes. In this way, you cultivate a friendship with the unknown, the very friendship from which wisdom grows. Feel the room, the colors, the hum of appliances, the unnoticed chorus of life continuing. Let your hearing open behind you as well as in front, as if your ears have eyes. Let your skin listen. Let your breath be permission. Without strain, sense the subtle recognition. The one who wants answers is afloat within a larger presence that adores the question. The question is not a lack. It is the lover's gaze that keeps the romance alive. The universe is not finished. How could you be? When you rise from this, take with you a simple vow, not inscribed in stone, but in attention, to notice when the body hardens around an answer, and to see if you can soften into the question. To notice when you are proving, and instead to choose relating. To notice when you are rushing to the end of the song, and instead to hear the note you are in. You will fail splendidly and often. That is part of the music. But the moment you remember, you are already forgiven, because reality was never accusing you. It was singing, and you had simply forgotten the tune. Walk on then, into your kitchen, into your office, into the street, into the waiting evening. Walk on with the good mischief of one who knows that certainty is a delightful toy, but a miserable master. When the mind demands a headline, give it a smile. When the heart offers a question, give it your attention. And as you fold your day back into the night, let this understanding keep you company. The ego will keep asking for answers. Let it. Being is already delighted with the question, and in that delight you are free